So, clearly, digital is transforming everything in our lives, in the lives of our customers, in the society in which we live. But what's interesting is while the change that we've been through in the last decade has been extraordinary, the rate of change is actually still increasing. So if you think it's been a rough ride over the past few years, then just ponder on the fact that today things are changing at the slowest rate for the rest of your life. So, just to illustrate that, call out if you recognize this place. Anyone? Shanghai, somebody said here, right. Absolutely. Shanghai. Keep an eye on the little green triangle, the triangle sort of pyramid on the left. So this is Shanghai. Less than 30 years between that and this. Never before in human history has there been the rate of change that we're experiencing right now. But it's not just in places as far away as this. When our parents were young, this is what the living room looked like. So people were focused around one big screen in the corner of the room, enjoying perhaps one or two channels. Now, everybody's got their own window into all the world's information and all the world's entertainment. And if there is a big screen in the corner, then it's a distraction in the background. The main event is in your hand. And if you've got teenage kids like I have, then you are definitely not the main event. And if you look at banking, the area I work in now, when I was a kid, banks looked like this. They were basically marble and wrought-iron fortresses designed to keep customers and staff apart while bits of paper were exchanged through grills. And where's your bank today? In your pocket, right? So the vast majority of banking transactions now happen on mobile devices. The economics are pretty compelling. If you're a UK bank, then it typically costs about £4 to service a customer over the counter, about 40p through an ATM, less than 4 pence through a mobile device. And that transformation, cloud-based data servicing customers, is happening in all industries. If we look at the medical profession, my doctor didn't look quite like that, but not far off that when I was a kid. But nowadays, about 60% of patients go into their doctor's surgery in the UK having pre-diagnosed their condition on Google. And that really pisses off the doctors, I can tell you. But if you're lucky, then your doctor will reciprocate. And your doctor will have an iPad or a screen, and they'll show you what the treatment looks like, how the symptoms might evolve. And so it's definitely affecting that industry. If we look at travel, some of you remember teletext. I was the smart guy who booked his honeymoon on teletext and ended up in a dreadful resort and nearly lost my wife. But every high street used to have a travel agent. And now where's your travel agent? Again, if you're a regular customer, you probably have most of the functions that a travel agent used to do for you in your pocket. And the high street used to have one of these. It's like a museum piece, isn't it? So who can guess when was the year of peak photo development? So the year in which more photos were developed and printed onto paper than any other. Any guesses? 2001, not far off. A little earlier, 98, in between. So one or the other. So it's 1999. According to Kodak, 80 billion photos around the world were developed and printed in 1999. That was the peak. Started going down after that as the rise of digital happened. This year, 2 trillion photographs will be uploaded onto the web, into the cloud. This year, more photos will be uploaded into the cloud than have been printed on paper in the history of the world. So, another illustration of the transformation we're seeing, because now everybody has a camera and a developing studio in their pocket. And then in terms of government services, if you're not online, then you're standing in line. But if you are online, then you've got amazing services at your fingertips. This year, 9 million people submitted their tax returns online, and about 13.6 million people were online just in the last week of January on the gov.uk website. And fascinatingly, 20 people submitted their tax returns online on Christmas Day, which is either an amazing testament to the flexibility of our government online services or a sad reflection on some people's families. So, clearly, digital is changing everything. We now have, around the world, 100 billion Google searches a month, 6 billion YouTube hours consumed every month. There are 1 billion people every day online, on Facebook, on their mobile devices. And these numbers are growing really fast. And for me, it's all driven by two fundamental driving forces. It's cloud connectivity and it's ubiquitous mobile. And what's interesting is that these are two driving forces which are far from spent. In fact, there's a lot more to come. Let's start with the cloud connectivity. So back in the mid-2000s, there were two states. You were either online or you were offline. And you used to go and log on to do stuff. Who remembers logging on? You know, your lunch break or the evening, you go and log on and sort out your web stuff. But now we're online all the time. But what's more interesting is that the speed of that connection has massively changed. So, who remembers this noise? So, a few of you. It's very nostalgic, isn't it? It's quite soothing. So, when the internet was something you could hear, turn that off now, sorry, go back one, but without the sound. When the internet was something you could hear, then basically what you could do with it was consume static text-based web pages. As it got a bit faster, you added images, faster still, videos online, more speed. We got downloading and consuming online films. Now you've got multi-party, high-definition video conferencing. And so none of what we are doing now at the fast end were we foreseeing way back at the listen to the internet phase. And so what's clear is that as the internet gets another order of magnitude faster, a whole bunch of new services and business models are going to be invented that we haven't thought of yet. And so more transformation is going to come. And we know that it's definitely going to come because we're already seeing it in pockets. This is an actual screenshot of a speed test of a customer of Google Fiber in the US. So that's a gigabit of upload and download speeds available at the same price that we pay for our domestic broadband at the moment, about $70 a month. And so clearly that's economic, it's here today, and it's going to come to everybody at some point soon. And so those amazing innovations that I was talking about are clearly on their way. And it's not just for the lucky people living in the Western markets where we're relatively well off. So we all take these things for granted. But there are another 5 billion people around the world who don't have the connectivity we enjoy. And largely that's because it's not economic to take the wires and the pylons and the towers into the places that they live. And so some smart companies, in this case Google, Facebook's doing something similar, are finding ways to overcome that barrier. So in this case, Google Loon is flying these high-altitude weather balloons at twice the altitude of commercial aviation. You beam the internet up from somewhere where it is to a first balloon, and then you daisy chain the data signal from balloon to balloon, and then beam it back down to the ground. An 80-mile radius, 4G speeds. And that's reaching people in rural India and Africa today. So if we think we've seen a transformation with 2.5 billion people around the world online, what happens when it's 7 billion? And then the rise of the smartphone. So clearly everybody in this room's got one. You can see the figures around the world are in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and closing by 5 percentage points or more a year. In fact, in India, last year, total internet penetration grew by 40%. So there's some extraordinary growth numbers going on, a lot of that driven by mobile. And so we're going to see the smartphone penetration going up from the 2.5 billion today up to much higher numbers, partly driven by the dynamic there, but also driven by the economics. So it used to be that the cost of a smartphone was a barrier to people in less developed markets. But I did a search on Amazon India at Christmas for the cheapest fully functioning Android smartphone. So front and back camera, touchscreen, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, decent specification, $50. Same search last month, $40. So you can see the economic barrier to getting the world connected is also disappearing. So if we believe that the key driving forces are connectivity and mobile, and I've shown you that those two things have got a hell of a long way to go, then clearly the transformation that we're seeing has got a long way to go too. But even for us who have enjoyed the benefits of pretty fast broadband and great affordable mobile devices, we're still not using half of what's available. So just to illustrate that, hopefully we can switch now to a screen. And what we've got here is a nice little app running on my phone, which means that the stuff that I show on my phone, you can see on the screen behind me. And I'm going to just do a couple of queries that I've got used to using on my phone to show you how it's got probably better than you might consider it once was. So, what is the active ingredient in Nurofen?
According to NPS Medicine-Wise, Nurofen Plus tablets contain the active ingredients ibuprofen and codeine phosphate. Ibuprofen belongs to a family of medicines.
Okay, enough. And what are the side effects?
According to NetDoctor, the most common side effects are related to stomach irritation and include abdominal pain.
Okay, so you get the idea. But what's interesting about that is that this is the out-of-the-box voice recognition. It's not been trained, it's not been tuned. That's just how it works. And the second question didn't mention anything about the drug in question. So it knew the context of the conversation. And so the ability of these mobile devices, cloud-connected, to do that kind of voice understanding is really got pretty good. How about this one? How long is the drive home?
There's heavy traffic on the way to your home, so it should take 2 hours and 10 minutes.
So it knows where I am from the GPS, it knows where I live from where the phone spends the night, it knows how fast the traffic on the M4 is moving from how fast other Android devices are moving down the M4, and it tells me how long it's going to take to get home. If I had an appointment booked at home in 2.5 hours' time, then in 20 minutes my phone would buzz and say it's time to leave, because that's how long it's going to take you to get home. How about this one? Quite often I'm out evenings for work, doing these kind of things, so this is useful. Remind me to buy flowers.
When do you want to be reminded?
When I get to Paddington Station.
Okay, do you want to save this?
Okay, so you can see there, what will happen now is that the GPS will keep an eye on the location of the phone. When the phone gets to Paddington Station, it will buzz and remind me to buy flowers. And when I get home, I'm the thoughtful, non-forgetful husband. Okay. How many of you have taken hundreds or thousands of photos on your mobile phone? Most of you. Ever had the situation where you wanted to show somebody something, but it took too much bother to find it or difficult to find it? Quite a few, yeah. So how about this? Show me my pictures of skiing in France in 2012.
Here are some matching pictures.
So what's interesting about this is that it knows it's France from the geotag, it knows it's 2012 from the date tag, and it knows it's skiing from the fact that they look like skiing pictures, that they are similar in terms of white background and bright foreground to other pictures that have been tagged as skiing. I haven't tagged any of these photos as skiing. It's worked that out. And I've given it permission to look at my online photo drive to pull those results out. Then there's this one. Any linguists in the room? Say, please can you take me to the airport by the fastest possible route in Hindi? Was that any good? Yes! We have a Hindi speaker there nodding, so that's very cool. Okay, and lastly, obviously the translation is useful in the spoken sense, but often you're in a foreign place and there's a sign that you want to be able to read, not necessarily a spoken language thing. So you can go to Translate app, you can click on that, and you can say, I'm going to use picture entry. Let me just grab this sign. Imagine you've got this sign. Some of you might recognize that as Spanish. So if I was to look at that through the camera, you can see the Spanish. Right, just let that focus. Now if I line that up, see that? Spanish, lined up, English. So I'm really not trying to show off. I'm just trying to illustrate the fact that the technology that we take advantage for today can do so much more than we think it can do. And so the rate of change that we're seeing today is clearly going to accelerate as more people get to adopt and understand and use more of that stuff. So clearly what's to come, hopefully I've convinced you, is more people who are more connected on more smartphones with more speed and using more of the available functionality. And all, interestingly, driven by Moore's law. So some of you might remember Moore's law from your science education. One of the founders of Intel, this great theory that anything that's based on a transistor gets exponentially cheaper over time. And don't worry about the dots on there, but basically one of the colored dots is a unit of storage, a megabit, and one is a unit of processing, a million instructions per second. And if you look at the arrows, in 2001, one of those units cost about 10 cents. In 2011, one of those units cost about 0.1 of a cent. Now, if you're in business and you're evaluating an investment project, 1% is a rounding error. It's essentially free. So when you're thinking about how your business might be in 10 years' time, you need to think, how would it be if all the things related to data and storage and transmission and so on were essentially free? And then you need to think, how might your business be different? Because that's the way Moore's law tells us things are going to continue to go. So consider your business in a world where bandwidth is free, storage is free, processing is free, and as I showed with the Indian smartphones, the hardware is tending almost towards free. And all of that is processing this amazing cloud of data, where you could say that data is the new oil. There's tons of it out there, but it's pretty hard to get at. It's only got value when it's refined, and it's only useful if it's distributed to the right places. And so when it gets there, it can really fuel and lubricate everything in your business. So there's some nice parallels with oil. And to give you some of the examples of things that the data is being used for, many of you have heard of the Internet of Things, lots more devices being tagged and cloud connected. Some analysts reckon there are about 5 billion connected devices in the world today, that there'll be 50 billion by the end of the decade, all of those sharing data with the cloud and allowing you to do amazing analysis. An example would be the movement from barcodes, which revolutionized retail 20 years ago, to RFID codes, which allow dynamic passage of data between the device and the reader, and you to read from a distance. So if you look at Zara, for instance, a leading retailer, they've moved from being able to do a barcode-based stock take of a big store, taking 10 people about 4 days, to doing it with RFID tags, where one person can do it in 4 hours. So you think about the order of magnitude change in efficiency with that kind of thing. And those tags are also moving up the supply chain onto every case and every pallet and every truck and every forklift in the factory. And then if we look at the manufacturing industry, so this is a picture of a CNC machine. These things are very expensive machines that have lots of different tools that mill out blocks of metal to make engine molds and things like that. Until today, it takes an experienced machinist or experienced machine programmer about 40 hours to program the tool path for one of these machines. What some clever entrepreneurs have done is taken the history of thousands of human-programmed tool paths and put them into the cloud and run them through an AI engine or a machine learning engine. So now they can put in the desired design of a new machine block and ask the machine learning engine to design the tool path. And they can now do it not in 40 hours, but in 20 minutes. And the resultant path is 50% faster than the best that the humans can do. Now, if we look at 3D printing, increasingly now we're seeing this as a solution to moving physical goods around. I know that the big shipping companies like FedEx and DHL have 3D printers at airport hubs. So the quickest way to get something to a place is to send the data through the cloud to the printer, print it out and ship it off somewhere. They recently sent a spanner to the space station through data and then printed it up there. And that's even being used in some unexpected industries. So this ring, 100,000 US dollars, was 3D printed. Or essentially the mold was 3D printed and then 18-karat gold was poured into it. This is a ring that therefore cost $100,000. The equivalent Cartier one was $250,000. This ring took 2 days. The Cartier one takes 2.5 weeks. So again, a surprising application of data into an industry you might not expect it. And then this you might recognize as a Tesla. So what's interesting about the Tesla is the Tesla Model S has got two similar variants. The Model S70, which has a 70 kilowatt-hour battery, or megawatt-hour battery, and the kilowatt-hour battery, and there's a 75, which has about 10% more driving range. Now, what's fascinating is that they both have exactly the same physical battery. They just unlock the extra 10% in software through a cloud update if the driver pays the extra. Because it's cheaper for them to do that than have two different batteries in the manufacturing process and in the assembly process. So you can see how the application of data is changing all sorts of industries in ways we couldn't imagine, and there's clearly a lot more to come. So a question I'm often asked at this point is, how does a company like Google, where I worked for 8 years, how does that think about innovation in a world that's changing so fast? How does it innovate in an exponential world? And obviously there's all the stuff about the environment and the beanbags and the lava lamps and the slides and all that kind of stuff. And that is important. And it does create the right environment. But much more important than that is the mindset. The mindset that the new technologies and the data and the computer wizardry are allowing you to think about 10x innovation, not 10% innovation. Thinking about innovation that is an order of magnitude better, more advanced than where you were before. It can help you be more successful because you can attract the best, drive them to work harder and be more excited, and have no competition if you win. And I'll illustrate that with Gmail. So who had an online web-based account in 2004? Hotmail, Yahoo Mail, something like that? Quite a few of you? Yep. So at the time, Google didn't have a web-based mail product. They knew they couldn't come out with something that was about the same as the others. It had to be an order of magnitude better. So they decided the biggest problem with those web-based mail things was they got full up. You had to delete your attachments if you had too many things in your mailbox. And so the best web-based mail you could get at the time was 25 megabits of storage. Google decided to launch with 1,000 megabits, a gigabit of storage, so 40 times better. They launched on April the 1st, 2004. This was seen to be a potential April Fool's gag. The journalist, the tech journalist at the time, couldn't believe that 40 times more storage could be anything other than a joke. And they had some good reason to assume Google might be joking, because we have this history of doing April Fool's gags. Two of my favorites here. You saw the translate into Hindi earlier. We did an app that would allow you to translate from dog or horse speak. You just hold the phone in front of your pet. If it makes a noise, it would return a random text string. People enjoyed that. And then there was the Google TISP system. That was the Toilet Internet Service Provision. Get a special cable from Google, plug one end in the laptop, the other end down the loo, and you had free broadband through the sewage system. We actually got quite a few applications for those cables, but they didn't work. But it wasn't an April Fool. It was a genuine offer, and it was an offer because we had this ambition to be an order of magnitude better, and we thought about how the technology could make that possible. And it made it possible because we understood Moore's law, and we knew that the cost of that storage was going to fall precipitously in the time that it would take people to use it up. So Google has had innovation throughout its organization since inception, but a few years ago, it built this extra bit along the side called Google X. And it's a special lab for the real 10x thinking stuff, or the moonshot thinking. Moonshot because a bit like Kennedy's project to put a man on the moon. And the idea is that it's looking for that little golden space in the intersection of these three circles. One, where there's a huge problem. The other, where there's a radical solution, one that might seem a little bit crazy or a little bit science fiction at first thought. And then the last one, a breakthrough in technology, where you can see that something which is now possible in technology that wasn't a little while ago means that this is no longer science fiction. So, to give you an example of that, think about self-driving cars. Self-driving cars, the first big circle, 1.1 million people die on the roads every year. And actually, the vast majority of those deaths are caused not by the cars, but by the drivers. The breakthrough solution is, if the drivers are causing the deaths, then take the driver out of the control position of the car. Seems crazy, but breakthrough in technology. We now have fast enough radar and LiDAR and processing and good enough GPS that that's possible. And now you can see the green car here is a driverless vehicle. It's perfectly controlling its position on the road. It's spotting all the other hazards. And actually, these Google driverless vehicles have done more than 1 million miles of test driving in California, and they've had only 12 accidents, all of them minor prangs where another vehicle with a human driver bumped into them. Then, if we look at the problem that many diabetics have, which is that they have to prick their skin to take blood to test the sugar levels. So that's the big problem, millions of people suffering from that. The radical solution is, well, let's measure something other than the blood. And it turns out that the fluid in your eye has the same sugar properties as the fluid in your blood. So the crazy idea there is, well, let's stick a sensor in your eye. Okay, sounds daft, but this is a glucose meter on the rim of a contact lens, which has been developed by some scientists. It communicates with your phone. It tells you when you need to take insulin. And it's in clinical trials now with Novartis in a joint venture. And lastly, to test your powers of 10x thinking. The idea is to break free from the constraints of the existing problem. So if you're a wind turbine manufacturer, wind turbines get more efficient when they get higher. So if you can go from 30 meters to 40 meters, it gets windier up there. And so that's an improvement. But it costs a lot more because you have to have more steel and more concrete and so on. So if you were facing this challenge from a 10x thinking perspective, how would you think about it? Any ideas? Balloons, right idea. Yep. Kites, genius man there. So this is Makani, a startup business that Google acquired a couple of years ago. And the idea here is you've got a glider wing, a bit like a kite. You put electric current through the tether, which spins the propellers. It flies it up to 400 meters, not 40 or 50 meters, 400 meters. Once it's up there, you turn the power off, the wind blows through the turbines, sends the power back down. And so you get all the benefits of a 400-meter tall tower with none of the costs of a 400-meter tall tower. Now, I know most of you are not in businesses which are generating power or helping people with diseases or driverless cars, but you are in businesses that have significant business processes and opportunities to 10x think. Imagine you have a business process today which takes 10 days. It takes you 10 days to complete an order or to manufacture a product or to underwrite a loan or something like that. You ask your team to make that 9 days, and they will go through a traditional innovation process of just trying to shave things and squeeze things. You ask your team to make that same day or 24-hour process, they will have no choice but to start again and to think about how the new tools of cloud-based data and real-time computerized decision-making and digital signatures and all the other things that weren't available a few years ago, they will have no choice but to use those things and to reinvent the process from scratch. And if they succeed with that, you will have a service or a product which is streets ahead of your competition. So I would urge you, thinking about the opportunity that the cloud, that mobile, that data provides you, think about what is your 10x and get away from incremental thinking. Thank you.